Hi friends, day 3 here of our daily devotionals. I want to read to you today from Ezekiel chapter 11, just looking at one verse, verse 16. The context of this is that the people of God have been scattered amongst different nations. They're no longer worshiping God together as they were used to in Jerusalem, but have had, through unforeseen circumstances, had to go into different places. Does that sound a little bit familiar? Let's look at what God says to these scattered people in verse 16 of chapter 11. Thus says the Lord God, though I remove them from among the nations, and though I scatter them among the countries, yet I have been a sanctuary to them for a while in the countries where they have gone. God starts by speaking to these scattered people to let them know that what they were going through, even though it was unforeseen by them, was now out of control for him. He says twice that I remove them and I scatter them. Like these are actions that he had taken. Not necessarily directly, but because this was all happening under his sovereign rule, there was nothing going on outside of his control. God was in and underneath and behind it all. And so we have to understand that right now things are spiraling and no one really knows which direction things are going to go. There's no contingency plan. Certainly the CDC is changing regularly on what's happening, and I'm grateful for how fast they're working and all our first responders and people who are working so far. But everyone is spinning. No one has a clue. Financial markets are breaking down. This is certainly taking everyone by surprise. And yet it is not taking God by surprise. This is happening under God's rule. This is happening with God still sitting on his throne. Now, it certainly raises a question, why would God, if he's in control, why would he allow something terrible like this to happen? Well, that sounds like a good devotional for tomorrow, and we'll get into that. But for today, what we need to see is that God is completely in control. He is ruling and reigning over all. He's not been taken by surprise by any of this. This is all happening under his sovereignty. And that is supposed to lead us to then trust him when he says, look what he does with his control. He exercises the control as a means of care. Even though they're scared, he says, yet I've been a sanctuary to them for a while in the countries where they've gone. Do you see the connection there? Because all things are under God's control, there is no place these people could go where God could not be with them, right? They're in different countries, and yet he is still being a sanctuary for them. A sanctuary, that was the place where people would go in the temple to experience the presence of God. And they could no longer go there. They've been scattered. The normal place where they went to worship God together, they no longer had access to it. And yet God's saying, even though you're scattered, even though you're in different places, because I am ruling and reigning over all, because nothing can stop me, because I've not been taken by surprise by these things, because I'm always in control, I can be an ever-present care for you. Right? Even though you've been scattered, I can still be with you as a sanctuary. And I think that's meant to be a comfort to us. God is in control of all things right now. And because God is in control of all things right now, even though we're scattered, even though we're not worshiping him together like we normally do, God can still be a sanctuary for us. His presence can still go with us. We can still experience him. Because while our normal place of worship has changed, the God we worshiped has not changed. While the normal means of grace that we use to experience God is different, the giver of grace is no different. God is unchanged, and therefore his care can always be experienced. We can worship God right where we're at, even when we're a scattered people. But I love how he says, though, he puts a timestamp on it. He says this has happened for a while, meaning it's temporary. They were scattered people, and they were going to experience God's care for them. They were going to experience God being a sanctuary for them, even while they were scattered. And yet, that was not meant to be a permanent thing. It was just for a while. But there was going to be a time when they could come back together and be a community who worshiped God united with one another once more. And if there's one thing that I hope that this time of us being scattered from one another accomplishes, I hope that it works in all of our hearts a longing to be back together in person. Like, I hope this shows us the importance it is to be able to gather in person. I'm grateful for the means of grace that digital communication is. But friends, I know that this is no substitute for you and I to be able to talk face to face with one another. And I think we're all feeling that. I think we're all, in this time of social distancing, we're appropriately missing one another. Like, we should miss gathering as a church on Sunday. I'm grateful for how God can allow us to gather online, and we're going to live stream our services. That's a blessing, but that's no substitute for worshiping God in person. And so I hope as we get out of this time, as we get out of this little while, as we're no longer people who are scattered in different places, but we can come back together to worship God together once again. I hope that this time of scattering makes us appreciate the time of gathering all the more. And so, friends, let's look to the Lord. He is in control of all things. He's going to use that control to care for us. And as He cares for us and meets us where we're at right now in this time of scattering, may that also make us long for the day when we're back together as one people worshiping the God who cares for us, who's in control, who's always worthy of worship no matter what we're going through. God doesn't change, and so even though our circumstances do, our worship doesn't have to. We are a people who experience the sanctuary of God wherever we go. I hope that you're experiencing that now while being scattered, and I look forward to experiencing that together when we come back once more when this is all over. Let's continue to look to the Lord and trust Him during these days. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.